Welcome back to the Fantasy Fortune YouTube channel. Today, we have 6 risers that are rising up the fantasy football rankings, whether it's because of more research I did or because of news that's coming out in training camp and preseason, injuries, and all that stuff. So, first of all, I'll give an honorable mention to Calvin Ridley, who's made a bit of a leap in the rankings because of the DeAndre Hopkins injury, paired with that offense being projected to be number 1 in passing attempts in the NFL. That could be a sneaky fire garbage time situation for Calvin Ridley, who's being drafted outside the top 35 receivers right now, especially if Hopkins at his old age maybe has that injury lingering. Anyway, let's get into the first guy on the list, and it's Cooper Kupp. He's already rising in the rankings. You know, he's been in the low 20s, the wide receiver 22, 23-ish. So for the most of the offseason in the summer, he's up to wide receiver 16 on Underdog now. He's rising up all the platforms, and it's because of the news that comes out of training camp. Apparently, he looks like the 2021-22 form of himself, back to healthy. And not only with that, Puka Nacua is dealing with his own knee injury. Now, if you watched my last video, which was players falling down the rankings, Puka was one of them, not only because of his injury, but because of his injury history and because of Cooper Kupp being hyped up and me enjoying that hype, because I've been in on him all offseason and then starting to hear that stuff from training camp. That's cool, right? Because he's been a target of mine all offseason because we know what he's capable of, right? The rapport between Matt Stafford, from Eric Moody on Twitter, is undeniable. He averaged 22.1 fantasy points per game with Stafford and has had a 30% target share in games played over the last 3 seasons. Second highest over that time frame. Excellent value, which I still think he's an excellent value. We all know what he did in 2021. Led in targets, receptions, yards, and touchdowns. Was about 50 yards away from 2,000 receiving yards, which is nuts, would have been. But I think people forget that obviously he was injured last season, started off with an aggravating hamstring injury and just completely wasn't his self, but he still gave us some solid finishes last year with Puka Nacua thriving in the offense himself. I think people forget that in 2021, he missed the second half of the season because of a season-ending knee injury. I forget if it was a knee injury, but whatever it was. Before he got injured, he was the wide receiver 1 in fantasy points per game. So you got wide receiver 1, you got wide receiver 1, and then you got dealing with injury. In terms of points per game, got dealing with injuries in Puka, and now I think it's flipped. Puka's the one dealing with injuries. He's the more expensive price. Would you really be surprised if Cooper Kupp was the wide receiver 1 in fantasy points in this offense? Because I wouldn't. Now, obviously, he's got to stay healthy, but that is baked into his price. If you told us that Cooper Kupp was 100% playing the entire season and not missing a game, he would probably go towards the end of the first, beginning of the second. But you can get him in the third, fourth at his current price, and that is beautiful. Let's go to the next guy, and that is... Oh, wait, actually, before I do that, I also wanted to mention that this offense is going to be top 10, a very pass-heavy offense. Their defense is bottom 10 with Aaron Donald retiring. Top 10 offenses that are very good passing offenses with a gunslinger like Stafford at quarterback, whose passing line is up and among the top 10 guys in the league, paired with a bad defense, is amazing for fantasy football because that means the more points your defense lets up, the more you're going to have to throw the ball. Beautiful. Next guy is Malik Nabers. Now, he did have his own ankle injury, but it's coming out that it shouldn't affect anything. It was just a mild ankle sprain, and he should be good to go by week 1. So I'm not personally worried about that. I don't like to draft guys that are already injured, but everything that we've seen on this injury is that it's nothing to worry about. And I'm sure you've seen all the crazy crap he's been doing in training camp, and that's just an added bonus. He's already been a guy that I've been targeting for the past couple months in fantasy drafts. He'll pop up a tweet from Nick Guglielmo. He's been dominating camp right, 17.6 yards per catch last season, led the FBS in plays of 20-plus yards, elite yards after catch as well, and will be a target machine because with Saquon gone out of New York, and this is what I like to say, right? Saquon was a guy that was held back a little bit in New York because he had a horrible offensive line. They never had a good quarterback or any receivers, so he was just the whole offense, whether it was dump it off to him or run him into the ground. But he was, for the most part, he gave us a top 5 finish. He gave us some top 10 finishes. He was always a top 24 pick in fantasy football because the offense ran through him. And now he's gone. Devin Singletary, nothing to worry about. This offense is going to run through Malik Nabers. And a tweet from David Glautieri on Underdog. Nabers is priced very, very high. And Underdog, I think, has it's best ball and it's different than redraft. But I think they have some pretty sharp ADPs because that is where people are paying big money. Whatever draft you're in, you're paying money to draft. And then there's like Sleeper and ESPN and Yahoo and like a lot of those things. People are doing mock drafts and you're getting ADP from there, and it's like people are putting their real money on the line here and drafting all offseason, May, June, July, August, right? So that's a pretty sharp one. If you go and look over on ESPN, Nabers is wide receiver 25 outside the top 50. And just you can read this, right? 35 spots behind Chris Olave, 9 behind Waddle, 36 behind Adams, Achane, Ayuk, Evans. I look at this list, and I think he's completely capable of outproducing some of these guys. Would you really be surprised if Malik Nabers had more receiving yards and fantasy points than Chris Olave? Because I wouldn't. He's going to have one of the best target shares in the NFL immediately going into year one. And I'm all behind it. I'm not worried about the injury. I think he's an underdog. I'm not calling him a value because he goes where he should be, and I still take a little bit of him. But my God, in ESPN and Yahoo and those home draft leagues, he goes 25, 30 like spots behind where he should be going. So he becomes one of the best picks, and he's risen a little bit in my rankings because I got to buy into that training camp hype, man. I mean, I try not to, but it's not just like a couple solid plays. He's just going nuts. But like I said, that's a bonus. I've been in on him all offseason. So let's talk about Rashee Rice now. And I'll pop up this from Ron Stewart, who posted a very cool graphic that I think he made. Rashee Rice's rookie season, the second half of it specifically, but we'll get to that in a sec, is literally exactly what Amon-Ra St. Brown's looks like. So, I mean, you can see it yourself. They had very similar ADOT, slot percentage, yards per route run, targets per route run, PFF receiving grade, points per, and then this is what I'm talking about. Points per game 1 through 11, weeks 1 through 11, they both were 8 to 10 fantasy points, and then they started getting really involved in the offense week 12 plus, and they both averaged over 18 fantasy points. Year 2 ADP, Amon-Ra wide receiver 30, and then he had a great season, and by the next season he was wide receiver 7, and now he's wide receiver 4. Rashee Rice ADP going into his second season, wide receiver 37. Now that has gone up since this graphic came out July 26th. I'm recording this on August 13th. I want to say he's wide receiver 32 or 33. And along with, Ron pointing out this great graphic, right? The reason that he is such a beautiful value is because he's supposed to be suspended. He was outside the top 40 wide receivers for a bit because, we're expecting a suspension for all the crap that he's gone through this offseason, but there's been nothing coming out about it. Like, nobody knows anything about it, and typically the NFL takes forever to deal with this stuff. So the closer and closer we get to this season, the less likely it is that he's going to see a suspension this season. I mean, I could easily see it being the first 6 to 8 games of next season or something like that, but I mean, we're getting closer here, and nothing's happening. He's climbing up. If he's not a guy that has suspension risk, he's going as a top 15 receiver. Last season, from weeks 12 to 18, we said he averaged 18.5 fantasy points per game. That was good for the overall wide receiver 8 in fantasy points. I mean, he just started going nuts in his yards after contact. Do I have that up? See another Chris O'Brien tweet. Nobody had more yards after contact than him besides CeeDee Lamb, Tyreek Hill, and Amon-Ra St. Brown. So yards after contact and yards per route run are two of the biggest indicators of fantasy success, and Rashee Rice is elite with that. He had top 10 yards per route run, and like I just said, that week 12 and on, that pace he was on was 1,400 yards and 8 touchdowns, which would be pretty fucking nuts. Anyway, another thing that came out, like Chiefs wide receiver snap count from Nathan Janke on PFF. Shout out, Nathan. So Rashee Rice, 6 snaps. Sky Moore, 5, everything but the first play. Xavier Worthy, 4, only played in 11 personnel. Hollywood Brown, 1, and then got injured, hurt his shoulder. So the value in Rashee Rice and the reason he's rising up my rankings, I don't think he's going to be suspended this close to the season. I think it's just going to end up getting pushed to next season. In that case, he would be ranked way higher. Number 2, Hollywood Brown's already injured, and he's very, very injury prone. If you check out my 3 wide receivers that I don't want to touch, Hollywood Brown is one of them. He's always getting injured. There's so many different injuries he's had over the past few seasons, so this doesn't surprise me at all. Xavier Worthy, right, it looks like he played 11 personnel only. Now, that's a small preseason sample size, but I don't think he's going to be this immediate target share earner off the bat. Like, this is still Rashee Rice's receiving room. And, I mean, whatever you guys think about Travis Kelce, I know some of y'all think that he'll be limited and they save him for the playoffs, you know. But he's just an awesome value. So, let's go to... what's this? The 4th guy, and that's Chase Brown. Everything that's coming out of Bengals training camp and coach speak and is pointing to him being the guy in this backfield, and I love it because 2 weeks ago I posted one saying fade Zach Moss, whether you're talking about my Instagram, which is Fantasy Fortune, my TikTok, which is Will Starlipper NFL, or YouTube. He was in one of my fades for my YouTube videos, and I have my own reasons for fading Zach Moss, and the biggest one is he came out of nowhere after being beaten out by Devin Singletary, not doing shit. And the only time he was good last season, if you look at the splits, and I still have people argue this with me, I say, Zach Moss averaged 22 fantasy points per game with Anthony Richardson and only 13 with Gardner Minshew, and that both of those were those sample sizes are with no Jonathan Taylor, right? So the backfield to himself with Richardson, 22. Backfield to himself with Minshew, 13. And everyone still argues with me like, oh, that's like Jonathan Taylor, like that's just like I can't even like form a sentence because I don't remember. They don't have a good point, right? But anyway, so I have my own reasons for fading Zach Moss. He's 26. Like I just think he's going to be the Miles Sanders, the Mike Davis, the Cam Akers, like. But anyway, he was RB 25, 26 a month ago, and Chase Brown's RB 39, 38, 40. Over the past 2 weeks, Chase Brown has soared up to RB 28, and Zach Moss has dropped to RB 30. From Adam Koffler, Chase Brown got the majority of the run reps. Okay, I'm officially ready to change my stance on Zach Moss. As it appears, Chase Brown is the 1A, has been a constant drumbeat throughout training camp. Zach Taylor from Coach Speak Index. Consistency, Chase has been very consistent, and that's what we're counting on him. He didn't get a bunch of opportunity, and so now is the first time he's getting a bunch of reps. This is also a guy that has carried a workload. He had a 300-touch season in college in Illinois, but he's got the pass-catching upside, right? Zach Moss is not going to do that. I just personally think Zach Moss kind of sucks, and sorry, but not sorry. I'm not drafting him. We all know that Brown has the most upside, and now that over the past 2 weeks it's come out that the Bengals believe that too, and they're going to use it too. I mean, I'm not going to use this as a real point, but one of the Bengals offensive linemen said, draft Chase Brown in fantasy football. He's going to have a great year. I don't really read too much into that, but it's kind of cool to add to this. So if I were you, Zach Moss, take his under on rushing yards on Underdog Fantasy. It's dipped a little bit, but holy crap, he week 1, I would have to check that. As the time I'm recording this, I'm not sure, but he was the second highest projected in rushing yards in week 1. So if that's still there, take the under on that. If you use code FORTUNE You'll get up to $250 for free. Well, not free. You'll get a $250 deposit match. Even if you just throw down $10 with code Fortune, they'll give you another $10. They'll double it. It's beautiful. And you can use that free money to join fantasy drafts or take the Zach Moss unders. So, but anyway, let's get into the fifth guy, and this is Kenneth Walker. And the first reason that he's rising up the ranks is because his offensive coordinator, Ryan Grubb, came out and said, I think he gets better every day. I think the sky's the limit for him. I think he's a really, really talented, powerful back. That's a true three-tool guy. He's electric out of the backfield as a pass catcher. And that was something that head coach Mike McDonald touched on too. I don't have that in front of me, but shit, I know I saw something. He's getting hyped up to be a three-down guy here in this backfield and getting more involved in the pass game, which was the only thing missing from him last season. And this tweet from Frank Amarante of the Game Day. Kenneth Walker is getting a lot of training camp hype, so this is worth reminding you. Once Walker became the lead back as a rookie in Week 5, he went on to average 14.9 points per game, and that was the RB8. And if you look at last season, 17 carries for 43 yards, 2 touchdowns, 18 for 97, 2 touchdowns, 17 for 79, 1 touchdown, 19 for 62, 1 touchdown. He was a touchdown machine the first half of the season. Week 11, he suffered an injury and kind of took a step back after that. Ended up finishing as the RB19, was the RB18 the year before, and right now he's going as the RB16. If we can get a healthy season out of him with more pass catching, and by the way, I kind of think Zach Charbonnet sucks. I don't think he's very good. I mean, he was one of the guys that the reason that Walker fell last season was because it was a kind of a Tank Bigsby situation where everyone thought he was going to be more involved than he was. And there were times where Charbonnet got the backfield to himself last season and he sucked. So, not worried about him. I think that Kenneth Walker has the potential to easily be an RB1 and play a full season. And he can have a great season in this new offense with Ryan Grubb. And let's get into the last guy, and this will be a quick one. Brian Thomas Jr. of the Jacksonville Jaguars will pop up another tweet from my guy Chris O'Brien. 2022, Adam Thielen had 36 red zone targets and 9 in the end zone. Jordan Addison ended up with 10 touchdowns in his replacement last season as a rookie. Calvin Ridley, 40 red zone targets, 22 in the end zone, and now he's replaced by Brian Thomas. Calvin Ridley had the third most red zone targets in the NFL last season, and he's gone. Brian Thomas Jr. led all of college football with 17 touchdowns last season. I think this is one of the easiest predictions to make. Those red zone targets are going to Brian Thomas, even if it's not all of them. This is a guy that's going to smash 5.5 touchdowns on Underdog Fantasy. No promo here, just telling you make some money. He's going to score 6 touchdowns. I think he will lead rookie receivers in touchdowns. Maybe not, that's a bold prediction of mine. Tweet from Nick Ercolano, second most vacated targets in Jacksonville, second most vacated air yards, fifth most vacated targets with 251. Most vacated inside the 10 targets. T-Law threw the second most deep passes per game last season. Brian Thomas, 17 yards per reception last season, 17 touchdowns. And I don't think I could play this, but Brian Thomas had a crazy catch. I don't even remember who the quarterback is here. I have a theory, but I'm not going to guess because that could be way off. He made a great catch, and then it's just a preseason highlight. And, we saw fucking Kenny Pickett do that shit last year, so who cares? Something cool, though, right? I think Brian Thomas is going to have a great season. And honestly, the only rookie receivers I would want over him are Marvin Harrison Jr. and Malik Nabers. Am I forgetting anyone? I would take Brian Thomas third, I think. Lad McConkey would be up there, Dunze. But I think Brian Thomas is walking into the best situation outside of Harrison and Nabers. And I know Nabers doesn't have a quarterback, but he's got that target share. So that'll do it for this video. Please leave a like or a subscribe. It helps me out a ton, and I put a ton of work into these. The video that will come out tomorrow is going to be how your first round of fantasy drafts should go, and I'm sure everyone will love the bold takes I'm about to make in that. So make sure you come back and leave a comment if you want any videos for me to make. So thank you for listening, and we'll see you in the next one.